Is MSNBC finally having to reckon with their coverage of the primary so far?
Joining us to analyze everything that's happening in the media landscape is friend of the show, Katie Halper, host of The Katie Halper Show and co-host Useful Idiots, a Rolling Stone podcast, which we were recently featured on and we thoroughly enjoyed.
That's right. And we've been getting a lot
So
of
much
subscribers.
Yeah,
it's
we
the
have.
Katie Halper
yay.
Bump. The
Bump.
bump.
Yeah, you got
Famous.
that bump.
All right, let's start
Famous.
off, Katie.
You're welcome, guys.
Let me think. Let's start off with the professional wrong person, Jason Johnson, as I deemed him. And as one of Risers, actually made a graphic for his Chiron that he's been benched by MSNBC. So there are some consequences, possibly, for spewing complete BS on the air.
Right. Well, yes, of course. He said, I don't know if you reviewed this already, but he.
We have the
clip.
sound.
Okay,
Let's play the sound of what he had to say that got him benched.
Videotape.
I do find it fascinating that racist liberal whites seem to love them some Bernie Sanders consistently and always have a problem with any person of color who doesn't want to follow with the orthodoxy of their Lord and Savior Bernie Sanders. The man cares nothing for intersectionality. And I don't care how many people from the island of misfit black girls that you throw out to defend you on a regular basis. It doesn't mean that your campaign is serious. It's clear. I want to make it clear. I'm not referring to Nina Turner. Nina's doing her job. Like I said, we had I have no issue with Nina Turner, but you have staff members on that campaign.
Who's on the island of misfit? Who's on that island, Jason?
I don't know. It's probably somebody who had a little difficulty on CNN this morning. Probably somebody who had a little difficulty on CNN this morning.
Wow.
Making it clear that he is referring to
Brianna Joy Gray. Joy Gray, right, who is a Bernie Sanders press secretary. I mean, I love that, and this is so typical of the woke washing that we see from so many people in the same exact clip that Jason Johnson claims that Sanders is not good on intersectionality, is not intersectional. He manages to make a fairly racist, misogynist statement about black women. And the irony is he's criticizing the black people who don't fit into his orthodoxy, into mainstream Democratic liberal blue media orthodoxy, which that orthodoxy, although it's changing a little bit, I think people are too embarrassed to keep on, some of them, to keep on pretending that Bernie Sanders lacks any political viability. But to smear these women, also have can I say this?
You could say it.
Have the balls, have the non-gendered balls, have the gonads, right? Have the gonads. Women have those too, or is that gametes? Whatever. Have the ovarian, testicular area to say, Brianna Joy Gray. I mean, don't hide behind that. So it's like cowardly. It's like nasty and mean-spirited. And, of course, he also got into it with Nina Turner when he defended. Right. He made the very salient point, which is that Mike Bloomberg is not an oligarch. And if he is an oligarch, which is like literally just, okay, let's just pretend words don't mean what they mean. And, of course, he did that great argument, which is like, well, Bernie Sanders has millions of dollars, is technically a millionaire. So, therefore, ergo, he's also an oligarch, which... Okay, that's not how it works. You don't have to be an economist to get
Katie,
that.
it made me deeply fear that this man is teaching children anywhere at the university. I was like, I actually looked it up. I was like, what courses is he teaching people? I hope it's not economics or having anything to do with political science.
Maybe it's satire. If it's satire, it's great.
Yeah, maybe he's good at it.
Performance art.
Woke washing, though. Katie,
really quickly, though, can I just add that what MSNBC still needs to do is discipline Chris Matthews and Chuck Todd, right? Because Chris Matthews every week manages to kind of process his PTSD from the Cold War and project that onto his analysis of Bernie Sanders. He fears that he's going to be executed in Central Park. He compares him, as you guys know, he compares Sanders' election winning of the Nevada caucus to the arrival of Nazis in France. That's a very sensitive analogy about someone who lost part of his family in the Holocaust. So I do think that what's dangerous is that as long as your smearing of Sanders is kind of is more subtle and you hide it behind historical analysis, or what Chuck Todd did, where he says he quotes someone who compared Sanders' followers to digital brown shirts. I mean, those people keep getting away with it.
Yeah.
So I get
that's
that.
a good point.
I mean, Jason Johnson's comments were they were so mean-spirited and nasty that I get that difference, but let's also keep our eye on the people who are not just correspondents, but host their own shows.
Right. That's a very important.
That's part of it is he's not an anchor there, so it's easier to bench him and discipline him, etc.
Yeah.
At the same time, this was very meta. So piece was published calling Elizabeth Warren the first intersectional candidate. Okay. Then, and this is like the woke part of it, there was actually a backlash to that framing, saying, she's a white woman, so this is offensive to be doing this. But just break down the piece and how you saw this all unfolding, Katie.
Yeah, this was great. I mean, this is another woke washing, right? And another example of people totally butchering the idea and the concept of intersectionality. You have this piece in The Nation, and the headline is Elizabeth Warren is running an unapologetically intersectional campaign. And the subtitle of that article is, as much as I want Medicare for all and for the rich to pay higher taxes, that won't cure sexism. Warren gets that. So I like this because this is a total straw man argument, or straw woman, or straw person argument, person of straw argument. And this is kind of a callback to Hillary's famous, breaking up the banks and racism, no, which I'm sure you guys remember. That was a really painful, it's almost a repressed memory for me because it's very triggering, and I kind of feel triggered. I'm sorry, I should have given a trigger warning before that. But that totally disingenuous argument that is so ironically anti-intersectional, because if you understand the connection between economics and race, and you understand what the housing crisis did, who it disproportionately affected, of course you understand that there's a relationship between breaking up the banks and racism. At the same time, no one has ever said breaking up the banks will get rid of racism, will end racism. And people get this. Look, everyone who supported the Lilly Ledbetter Act, right, under Obama, they didn't say, okay, now we're done with sexism. That's the thing that made it easier for you to sue over like wage inequality or sexism on the job. This is this new thing I've seen since 2016, because again, people can't defend the policy critique. They don't have valid policy critiques of Sanders, so they have to pretend that anything he does is again, they have to make the straw man argument that anything he does is not going to fix all racism and sexism. And of course, no one is claiming that. And at the same time, there is a relationship between those two things. And the piece is like a typical trope of like, look, I love these things, I really do, but again, how does she understands that it won't end sexism? Sanders understands that it won't end sexism. I actually had a tweet. I retweeted Natalie Shore, who's great and really great on healthcare, by the way, and would be a great guest. I'm just pitching her. Where she tweeted, absolutely no one has ever argued this, and Elizabeth Warren has no plan to cure sexism either. This is a completely inane construction. And
I
had a
fair,
moment of
because she does have that plan to wear a pink Planned Parenthood scarf at the inauguration.
You're right.
So,
yeah, you're right. And so that is her Nancy
fair.
Pelosi clap moment. And her Nancy, that is basically the equivalent of ripping up Trump's speech, which, as you know, every page that's ripped up frees a child from a cage. And so every Planned Parenthood pin that Warren wears provides a woman with an abortion or something. But as I tweeted, I said, I'm so embarrassed. My entire argument for Bernie has been higher taxes cures sexism. I was so wrong. As if anyone thinks that. But, the same article, Susanna Walters suggests that she cites the Combahee River Collective for coming up with the theory of identity politics, which is very linked to intersectionality. And people should know that the way that they developed, it's a black radical collective, the Combahee River Collective, the way that they developed the term identity politics meant something very different from the way it's used today. Today, it's often used to talk about representation, and that's not what it was. It really was intersectionality and looking at how these things overlapped. And she endorsed Bernie Sanders, so I suggest that Susanna Walters maybe talk to her about why she endorsed him, since she's much closer to intersectionality. She's not just a white scholar, but she's one of the black feminists who created that term. So that could be a very eye-opening thing for her.
Excellent point, Katie.
All excellent points.
And one more thing is that it reminds me of the same performative intersectionality that, to be fair, Warren didn't say this, but we did have someone at the Washington Post actually say that Warren taking selfies was a lot like Frederick Douglass taking photos of himself.
Well, let's never forget that.
Yeah, never forget.
Yeah.
I thought that was a compelling argument.
Right.
That won me
Personally.
over. That
I know.
one. I saw that connection. I thought it was really strong.
All right, Katie. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks,
for
Dave.
joining us.
Thank you.
We'll see you later.
All right, we'll have more for you just after this.